Hello and welcome to our series of interviews with candidates who are vying for leadership positions in the city of Springfield. Today we bring you two interviews with candidates who are running for mayor of Springfield. I'm Jennifer Moore, the news director and content coordinator at the NPR station KSMU here in Springfield, and we're very glad to have you with us. KSMU is here as part of a coalition of civic and educational organizations that have joined hands to inform you, the voters, ahead of the April 6th municipal election. Our coalition is bringing you interviews for candidates who are running for Springfield Public Schools Board of Education, Springfield City Council, and as I said today, the mayor of Springfield. And just a reminder, the general municipal election is Tuesday, April 6th. If you have questions about where to vote or about your voter registration, you can call the Greene County Clerk's office. That number is 868-4055. Today, the candidates who are running for mayor of Springfield are Ken McClure, who is the incumbent, and Marcus Ayton. And here's how the format of these interviews will work. I will interview these two candidates one-on-one. Both candidates will be asked the same questions with the exception of one unique question posed to each candidate. Both candidates will have the same amount of time to respond. The candidates have not seen the questions. All of these questions were decided upon by the organizations in our coalition. The order of the candidate interviews was determined by a random drawing, and this program was pre-recorded and it will be posted on the websites and social media platforms after this broadcast. Our first candidate today is the current mayor of Springfield, Ken McClure. To find out more information about McClure's campaign, you can visit his website. That's mcclureformayor.com, or you can email him at kenmcclureformayor@gmail.com. And for those listening by radio instead of watching the Zoom presentation, McClure is spelled McClure. Mayor Ken McClure, thank you for joining us.
Jennifer, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's jump right in the interest of time, beginning with a question on poverty. At least 1 in 5 Springfield residents lives below the federal poverty level, and some data would actually put that closer to 1 in 4 residents of the city. What are your plans for addressing Springfield's poverty rate, which is about twice the average for the state and nearly twice the federal average as well?
Actually, our community has made excellent progress over the past 10 years on poverty, and numbers, I think, will be reflective of that. That doesn't mean we are where we should be. We have more jobs available than we have people available to fill them, and that gets to a skills gap where we need to have people who are adequately trained in order to have these higher paying jobs. One of the best things that has happened to our community has been the groundbreaking, which occurred last November at the Ozarks Technical Community College, of the Center for Advanced Manufacturing. The purpose of that center will be to provide the high-skilled training that employers need to hire people with those skills. That will result in hopefully people being trained for the jobs which they will need at higher levels of pay and give them to the employers, meeting our skills gap. Other interesting things which are very, very encouraging is we've had 2 high-paying employers coming into town. Costco announced its plans almost a year ago to construct a facility here. That will begin soon. Secondly, Amazon is coming into town, both in Republic and in Springfield. They're going to be hiring full-time and part-time workers at $15 an hour and up. All of those are helping us with the wages. And so trying to get poverty levels up, I think we are making the right strides in the right direction. We need to make sure that we have the ability to handle that skills gap, to make sure that our employers get employees who are trained for the particular skill sets which they need. Other aspects of that include something called the Build My Future, which had to be put on hold a year ago, but that's been a consortium of construction industries, electricians, masonry, that type of thing. And they've brought in several hundred high school students from Springfield and the surrounding area to basically say, we have good paying jobs here in what we would typically call the construction industry, but that would include plumbing, that would include electricians, masonry, Uh, all of those types of things would say, these are good paying jobs. Let's take advantage of them. And so I think over time, we're going to see those poverty numbers continue to improve. I'm sorry, you're on mute here.
Classic. That's so 2020, isn't it? Classic blunder. Next, policy question on homelessness and the unique challenges brought forth by the pandemic. To prevent the spread of the coronavirus, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, has recommended that cities don't disrupt homeless camps during the pandemic. But currently, Springfield's protocol does not follow that advice. What are your thoughts as mayor, and would you consider implementing those guidelines?
We want to do what is best for our community. We want to make sure first that those who are homeless are safe during the COVID. And so that's why we have instituted specific times where they can be tested. We've instituted times where they can be isolated when we have those types of positive tests. That to me has been critical, because the last thing we want to do is to expose more in the homeless community to the virus, and we don't want that to be spread throughout the community. I think we have taken the correct steps throughout this pandemic and dealing with that with the homeless community, recognizing that it's always hard when you try to disrupt something, but we've all been disrupted. I think what we have ultimately ended up doing is taking the correct steps for safety, both for the homeless and for the community.
So just to follow up, is that a no then, that you would not consider implementing those temporary guidelines?
You never say no. You always look at things and they're continually being evaluated, but any decisions we make are going to be made only after looking at the appropriate data and the information coming from that. So you never want to box yourself in to say categorically yes or no. It's always under review.
Okay, next a question on public safety. Data from the Springfield Police Department from last year, January through September, shows 1,794 domestic violence reports. Domestic violence, as you know, has profound effects on children, jobs, public safety. What is your strategy for curbing domestic violence, sexual assault, and dating violence in our community?
Each of those are critical issues, and all are being dealt with in a collaborative fashion. For example, domestic violence, we know, is a crucial problem in our community. We've been working with our partners at Greene County, for example, in establishing the Greene County Family Justice Center, which is dealing specifically with domestic violence issues. We've also been working with the Borough Behavioral Health Center on implementing what's called the Rapid Access Treatment Center. And that's actually a model which I hope will be put into place statewide, where as our first responders, our EMS people who are out there with people who are experiencing difficulties like that, being able to go to borough, be analyzed, and then afforded the appropriate level of treatment. That's so crucial in what we're doing. I want to see the state pick that up as we are able to hopefully put that into place on a much broader basis. The Sexual Assault Task Force, which City Council approved several months ago, did a great piece of work on analyzing where we are. I'm so pleased with where they came out with. You may know that City Council just a couple of weeks ago has approved actual funding for the remaining kids to get tested. That was $126,000. So we're approaching that, I think, in the right way and in a serious and professional way, understanding that that's a serious issue for us. But I think we're stepping up both in terms of what the police are doing, what we're doing with our mental health partners, what we're doing with our partners at Greene County, all of which try to deal with the public safety issue in a collaborative fashion. For example, in September of 2019, convened 4 mayors of the largest cities in the state, St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, and Springfield, the first time that group of 4 mayors had ever been together in the same room at the same time. But we brought them into Springfield. We were able to have a full day of discussion talking about public safety in general, crime in general. What do we need to do collectively? The result of all of that was legislation which passed last year during the special session, which set up a witness protection program.
Thank you. Thank you. And for the final question, unless we have time for another one, the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce is an important player in this community. And I'm wondering, how do you as mayor consider the recommendations of the Chamber of Commerce without letting such a robust organization dictate or lead policy?
We are a collaborative community, and nothing of any consequence gets done in this community without all of the community leaders playing a part. The chamber is a key part of that, but not the only part. Our healthcare providers, there are education institutions are there, our not-for-profits are there, such as the Community Foundation, such as the United Way of the Ozarks. Certainly, economic development and quality of place and economic vitality are council priorities. Our economic development teams are just that, they're teams. The chamber's involved, the city's involved, the county's involved, city utilities involved, the Springfield Business Development Corporation is involved. When we have growth economically, that does not just happen. For example, we had 1,000 new jobs in 2020 in spite of a pandemic. That was $25 million in increased payroll, $325 million in increased economic investment. Again, that does not just happen. Amazon, American Airlines, Kraft Heinz, Costco are just examples of the employers coming in. Economic development is a teamwork. The chamber is a key part, but others are players as well.
Mayor Ken McClure, running for re-election for Mayor of Springfield. Thank you very much for taking time to join us. And joining us now for his interview is the other candidate running for Mayor of Springfield, Mr. Marcus Ayton. And to find out more information about Ayton's campaign, you can visit his website. That's marcusayton.com, or you can email him at realmarcusayton@gmail.com. And again, for those listening by radio, Mr. Ayton's last name is spelled A-T-O-N. Mr. Ayton, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Let's jump right in with a question on poverty. At least 1 in 5 Springfield residents lives below the federal poverty level, and some data would point to figures closer to 1 in 4 residents. What are your plans for addressing Springfield's poverty rate, which is about twice the average of the state and about twice the federal average as well?
That is a super important question, and when it's actually closer to 1 in 4. But so I've heard, I guess, the statistic you shared second. So the big thing that I feel is super important in a city is that everyone has a fair chance to get ahead. And in a city where up to a quarter of the people are really struggling, that's a problem. We need to address it. And there are a couple of things that I'd like us to look at. One of them is I'd like to continue to promote, like OTC is doing, apprenticeships and workforce development programs. So there's, when you get a job, you have on-the-job training. So that way you can continue to earn money while you're building your skills. Another thing is I'd like to see if we can't introduce the option for neighborhoods to start using more mixed use development. Right now, there are places in the, especially in Zone 1, where we don't have any grocery stores. So if we made it a little bit easier for someone to open a local bodega or a local market, I think that would be a really great way for accessible business ownership, and would also provide a service to the people who live there. And just helping to bridge this gap that we do have between the north side and the south side, that would be a really good thing to do.
Okay, next, a question on policy regarding homelessness and the unique challenges that the pandemic has brought. To prevent the spread of the coronavirus, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, has recommended that cities don't disrupt homeless camps during the pandemic. And right now, Springfield's protocol doesn't follow that advice. What are your thoughts on that? And would you implement those guidelines?
So if the story you're referencing is where a nonprofit or a private home has been providing shelter for the homeless, then I think they should absolutely be able to help those people if they want. And the big thing with homelessness, honestly, is I think we have so many resources in town with the churches and with nonprofits that are so good at what they're doing. I get questions a lot about what I think the city council can do to help the homeless. And really, I think the best thing we can do is promote the wonderful services that we already have, like Convoy of Hope and the Freeway Ministries, for example. There are those two and others do more than just provide a meal and a coat to the people who are struggling. They really have like programs that they can walk people through, and they have much more like hands-on involvement with these people. And when you're in such a tough spot like homelessness, you really need the emotional support that some of these programs can provide. So I'd really love
If I
to.
may jump in, I hate to interrupt.
Sure.
Let me clarify exactly on the policy issue. So right now, Springfield's policy is that those camps can be disbanded. So camps that are on public property or perhaps under a bridge somewhere. But the CDC has recommended that those remain in place until the pandemic or until further notice. So do you have any specific thoughts on that as a policy issue?
Well, I kind of feel like, I don't know, being under a bridge doesn't sound terribly safe. And I'd like to see if we couldn't help get these people into some sort of a program or some sort of a shelter that has better like services for them. And I think there's a lot of health and safety guidelines that are in place right now. And I think if we're able to go about our days where we kind of go to work and go back home, I think there's a way that we can continue to help the homeless despite, the dangers of COVID.
Thank you. Moving on to a question about public safety. Data from the Springfield Police Department showed that last year, between January and September, Springfield had 1,794 reports of domestic violence. Domestic violence has profound effects on children, jobs, and public safety. What is your strategy for curbing domestic violence, sexual assault, and dating violence in our community?
A really big thing that would help us, I believe, is developing some better, working better with our police. Right now, we're short on the number of police officers that we should have for supporting the entire city. And if we could have officers assigned to neighborhoods around town, so that way they get to really know the people who live in the neighborhood, that would be really helpful for building a better relationship between our police and our residents. And right now they're just kind of short-staffed, and it's hard for them to kind of watch everything that's going on. One of the benefits of having police officers assigned to specific neighborhoods is they get familiar with the residents, and they get to recognize where there's a problem area. And also, if they're in that neighborhood regularly, they can more easily see when something looks off. So I would like to just see us give the police some more resources so they can do that. And that's more of a preventative measure that we could take.
Thank you. And lastly, can you please share what shapes your core beliefs about the responsibilities of local government and how you determine what its limits are? And please be specific if you can.
Okay, let me get this right. So the role and then the limits.
So what shapes your core beliefs about the responsibilities of public, of local government, and then yes, the limits.
Okay. Well, specifically for the city council, I really actually like the format of it because it's designed to be this platform that provides, access for really anyone in the city to get involved with local politics and just be more hands-on in shaping the community. So I like the idea that it encourages involvement from everyone in the town. And I really like how it partners in with the city government. So there's a lot of stuff that the city government has to focus on that's very detail oriented. And with the city council, then they can come in there from a much higher level view because we're out in the community working and living. And so we convene then as a city council to hear what's going on and just provide some input for what the city is working on. The limits would be really just, I see the role of city government more to guide, at least for city council, more to guide than to govern, because we have a city government that does the governing. So the real design of the city council is for us to just kind of provide some community feedback, really. And I would just love to see that really encouraged. I feel a lot of times when I watch city council meetings, they have topics that come up that it looks like people sometimes already have their minds made up about how they'd like to vote on an issue. And I think it's important that the city council remain open-minded and hear all of the voices that are being brought to them during the meeting.
Thank you. And I'm going to follow up on the first half of that question because I didn't hear an answer to it, and that is, what shapes your core beliefs about government? So, for example, is it a political platform, a religious background, a life experiences? What would you say contributes to your understanding of the role of local government?
I mean, I'd like to just see a government that's doing what's best for the people. And I feel like that means we need to prioritize the residents and our local businesses over the bigger corporations. Does that answer your question?
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to end it there. And I thank you, Mr. Marcus Ayton, who is running for the mayor of Springfield. Thank you so much for taking time to join us.
All right, thank you.
That concludes our interviews with candidates for the mayor of Springfield. These interviews, along with other municipal candidate interviews, will be posted on the websites of members of our coalition, including our website, ksmu.org, and keep an eye out for those on social media as well. And just a reminder, you can find out who has donated to a candidate's campaign through the Missouri Ethics Commission. You can do that by going to the main website. That information is public, and the website is mec.mo.gov. Then you'll click on campaign finance at the top, and then click on searches. And then you'll want to select candidate or committee name. And I would recommend there entering the last name of the candidate for the best results, and then click on the reports tab. A special thanks to candidates Ken McClure and Marcus Ayton for participating and for being interested in serving our community. Again, mark your calendars. The election is Tuesday, April 6th. I'm Jennifer Moore, News Director and Content Coordinator at KSMU Radio. And on behalf of the Coalition of Civic Organizations hosting these interviews, thanks to you for joining us.